Welcome to part 2 of this beginner-friendly board and batten wall project. In this video, we'll be working on the framing and installation. If you want to see exactly how I brought this wall to life, stay tuned.
You don't know what you do to me. Between me and you, I feel like chemistry.
Before cutting, let's double check our wall measurements using a tape measure. Remember, measure twice, cut once. And do not solely rely on the laser distance measure. This is my first mistake and it can be inaccurate. If you're working alone, break the wall into sections and notate as you go. If you struggle reading the tape measure like me, go ahead and get one with the 1/16 inch markings. It will make your life so much easier. Once you've combined your wall sections for both the width and the height in inches, plug those numbers into ChatGPT along with the number of sections you want. I started by sketching my design on paper, and ChatGPT helped calculate the wall spacing and cut list measurements. You can refine them as needed. When cutting your boards, make sure that all ends are perfectly straight and at a right angle. Use a rafter angle square to check your ends and draw straight lines before cutting. I highly recommend cutting in phases to avoid miscuts and unnecessary waste. I'm starting with the outer frame first, and once that's installed, I'll move into cutting and fitting the inner stiles. Label each style so you'll know exactly where it goes during installation. Some styles may be slightly shorter or longer than others since most walls aren't perfectly flat. Keep a printed cut list handy. It's great for quick reference and tracking any measurement changes. Now it's time to cut. Make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area, preferably outdoors or in a garage, and always wear a mask to avoid inhaling dust. When cutting, make sure your blade is perfectly aligned with your cut line, and always start the blade before it touches the wood. Always. Continue with this process until all of your phase 1 cuts are complete. I ended up cutting another spacer for some additional design openings, but I didn't end up using it since I changed my final design at the last minute. Now it's time to paint, and take my advice when I tell you to paint the edges of every style first. I only did the outer frame and I totally regretted it later. Painting between those tight seams after install was not fun. As you can see in my original design, I planned for smaller openings at the top and the bottom of each column. If you do decide to go this route, use a spacer to mark the wall for accurate placement, and be sure to plan around outlet covers and light switches. Go ahead and grab your brad nail gun and your brad nails. As you start installing, remove the template tape as you go. Since I'm starting with the outer frame, I'm removing that section first. For perfect seams, I'm installing the top and the bottom frame first, then the side stiles. Start by placing the bottom stile directly on top of the baseboard edge, making sure that it's flush against the wall with minimal gaps. Once aligned, secure in place with the nail gun. Now here's where things got tricky, and exactly why I recommend cutting in phases. I ended up over measuring and had to mark and trim most of my styles. Thankfully, they were a little too long instead of too short, so I didn't waste any wood, but it was definitely time consuming. Installing the top frame was a bit challenging. Trying to balance the long style while holding the nail gun wasn't easy. If you have someone to help, definitely use this extra set of hands. Make sure the style is flush with your ceiling before securing it with your nail gun. Again, I over measured with the top and the side styles, so I had to make a few adjustments. As a helpful tip, I recommend subtracting about 1/8 to 1/32 of an inch from your cut list. That small gap will help everything fit together cleanly. Don't worry, we'll fill those tiny seams later. Now that I made those cuts, everything is fitting together perfectly. If you notice any styles that aren't completely flush with each other, use a shim to help bring it forward and even things out. Once your shim is in place and the styles are flush, go ahead and secure the style to the wall. After that, you can simply just break off the excess shim. Next, I'm adding the vertical side styles to complete the outer frame. The left side style was a bit too short, which left a gap that was too noticeable for my liking. So I lifted the style upward to shift that gap towards the bottom where it's less visible. I'll still fill it in later, but it helps for a cleaner overall look. I did a quick double check to make sure everything was flush and aligned, and now we're ready to move on to phase 2, installing the inner styles. In phase 2, we're cutting the inner styles. Ideally, all of the inner styles will be the same length, but since most walls aren't perfectly flat, I started with a test cut based on my cut list measurements. From there, I made small adjustments as needed to get a precise fit. Using the test cut, I measured and marked each style location with its precise length, adjusting as needed to get a snug fit. Every style ended up being slightly different, so this step helped ensure a clean, even alignment across the wall. Once I made my cuts, I used my torpedo level and spacer to place the inner styles. Since all of my lines were already marked, the laser level was no longer needed at this point. It seriously just made everything a little bit more complicated. And here we go again with the adjustments. I overcompensated on my measurements again for the inner styles and had to make a few tweaks. Thankfully, no wood was wasted. As you can see, the center style fit perfect, but the others were slightly too long. I just took each style, held it in place, and marked it exactly where I needed to trim based on its position. At this point, I was so tired of walking up and down the stairs. Once I marked and trimmed the stiles, everything fit perfectly and I was able to finish the rest of the framing pretty quickly. Again, all I'm doing is just using my spacer and torpedo level to make sure everything is aligned and evenly spaced before securing each stile with the nail gun. So remember when I warned against relying on the laser measure? This is exactly why. My original wall taping was based on those numbers, which threw off my spacer measurement. I didn't redo the entire layout, so my last style is a little bit off, but visually you can't even tell. And just like that, the framing is complete. Stay tuned for part 3 where we'll be caulking, filling, and painting to bring everything together. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll be notified for more beginner-friendly home improvement projects. Bye!